My name is Michelle Montgomery. I'm one of the teaching assistants with Steve Schwartz in the LSAT Unplugged program. And so I'm going to do a brief little introduction of who you are, Ms. Christine, and then jump into a little conversation with you, if that's all right.
That sounds great.
Let's do it. So guys, for those who will be viewing with us, whether here today or joining us afterwards on one of the video chats, hello to you and welcome to your law school journey. I'm Michelle Montgomery. As I said earlier, I'm here with the LSAT Unplugged team, one of your teaching assistants. And we have the wonderful Ms. Christine Carr here with us today. She is, I'm going to give you a cool little bio that I wrote and got for her. So Christine is one of the former associate directors of admissions at Boston University School of Law. And 9 years at BU Law, she read over 10,000 personal statements, guys, counseled thousands of prospective applicants through the application process, manage the operations of a highly selective law school. Believing that the law school application should launch your legal career, she knows what makes a successful law school application and looks forward to helping you gain admission to top law programs across the country. I got to give you your props here, Christine. She earned her from Harvard College, Master's in Education from Suffolk University, Boston, and MSW from Boston University. Is that all of that? And then some, I believe?
Just that. That was plenty.
I said all of that and then some more. But that is great. We are so happy to have you here. I'm going to jump right in and I just read a small bit right about you, but if you will, I want to open the floor up with the opportunity for you to further introduce yourself and give a little bit more background into your previous position and then what you're doing now.
Sure. So I, before coming to BU Law, I've been working in college admissions and, on the undergraduate, and then also I was doing some MBA admissions. So, I luckily had the opportunity to join the BU Law admissions team, and law school admissions is, it's amazing. It's offers so many opportunities to prospective students and prospective lawyers. It's just a really great learning experience. There's so many things that you can do with a law degree that isn't just like, either being in a courtroom or being in a conference room and, pushing papers. Like you're change makers. And so to work with prospective law school students and hear about their journeys and why they're going to law school, it was a great experience and part of what I really enjoyed about my time there. And so what I'm doing now is, one, I'm psyched that I'm working for an organization known as Accepted. It is a company that's based in LA. I'm based still in Boston. I'm still Boston born and bred. And so I work with some really great colleagues at Accepted, and I'm on the law school admissions team. And so I'm still able to tap into that, the love of that, and kind of still getting that energy and that vibe from the applicants.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then I'm also, while at BU, what I did see while working in law school admissions and admissions in general is just the barriers to education, right? And so, like as a gatekeeper,
right.
In an admissions office, I saw, the struggle. I saw it firsthand, and so I like all the applicants that I was reading, like I wanted to be a change maker too, right? So I took some classes at BU in the social work program, loved it. And so now what I'm doing is I'm actually a school social worker. And so I'm working with middle school kids, high school kids, and then I'm also doing the Accepted stuff. So I'm like following people on their journey and, trying to help where I can and counsel where I can.
Yeah, you're everywhere. You are everywhere. I love it though. I love it. Like I believe like you stayed in this helping mindset though, right? Even after leaving the admissions kind of world, if you will, but still dabbling into it, right? Like couldn't get enough of helping us get into law school. So I'm gonna still do that and do some more. Kind of speaking of that, I have some questions here and we'll just kind of go with the flow of the conversation. but I do have some questions because I read some stuff that I thought was really cool that you said, and I want to jump into some of those things. But you have a great deal of experience in law school admissions world, right? So what would you say is or was one of the most difficult aspects of working in law school admissions?
Yeah, so one of the most difficult aspects was, and this is no mystery to the applicants, is like the quantitative measures, right? So the numbers, right? The LSAT, the GPA,
Yeah,
and how like that, can make or break in certain instances as or determine what schools are going to be probable, possible, right? Or just
right,
completely out of
right,
reach. Yeah. And so that was a struggle, right? To be kind of driven by the, in admissions offices, we are given parameters. We're given like from these, determinants from the deans, from the powers that be, saying like,
right,
hey, we'd like a 160 this, and the GPA, we'd like it to hit a target this. And so, you're looking to craft a class around these competitive measures. And so that's hard. That said, the numbers, there's statistical significance behind it. And when you want to set students up for success, you're using those statistical measures. And so the LSAT, a higher LSAT score is correlated to greater chance of achievement in your first year
right,
of law school. It's not one-to-one though, right? And so,
right, right,
yeah, and so as I keep thinking like, we understand that on admissions committees. We know that there are human beings behind the numbers. And so it's a way, that was a difficult thing as far as like not to get lost in a very one-dimensional process and remember that there's a human being behind this that's going to
I
bring
love it.
all of these other intangibles, which is where the personal statement, the resume, and the
Right,
other kind of, like I call them like the color, like all, the rest of your narrative that's going to come in and be like, you need me in your class because
right, exactly.
yeah.
That's so it's interesting. I have some questions, like I said, but what
But we froze up just.
I have to kind of jump. We know, right, that the law school candidates need to demonstrate some of those academic disciplines and skills, kind of like what you just said. But we also, as you said, Christine, we have to acknowledge that the numbers are not everything, right?
Right.
There's other factors that play a
Right.
role into acceptance. So I did read a little bit about you, and I read something that I thought was really great that you said, and I want to dive in there just a little bit. So in one of your profiles, you actually talked about working with prospective applicants on what you call the quantifiable and qualifiable components of the application, right? And you said taking it from a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional process. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I was like, this lady's got it, I want to talk to her, right? So tell us a little bit more about that, if you will.
Right. And so that's a little bit of like that piece I was just talking about is that, the application as a whole is, and again, it's your first kind of contract as a prospective lawyer. And so in that contract, you're creating this narrative and your goal is to show like, admit me, right? And these are all of my areas of strength. And so
Right.
I pocket them as like the quantifiable measures, like everybody has to submit a test score and a GPA. And those are the measures that, again, that statistical significance piece, that data has been done, there's metrics that admissions committees can use and they're helpful.
Right.
Not to be all and end all, but helpful.
Right,
And then
right.
there's the qualifiable measures, the qualities that an applicant is bringing as a person, as a human being. And
Right.
this is the living, breathing, DNA. This is what you're going to be in the classroom every day. And so that's immensely important because there is a lot of wiggle room with, I shouldn't say a lot. There is wiggle room with the quantifiable measures, when you,
Right.
and so what schools are doing is they're going to have a large pool of candidates that are quantifiably admissible.
Correct.
It then becomes the qualifiable, the qualities of each applicant that's going to set you apart. And, in that you want to show that I've taken advantage of opportunities that have been in front of me, because schools are like, we're offering all these great opportunities. We want to make sure that we're not enrolling, really smart duds, for lack of just to come in and then, go in the library, and that's their experience.
Right,
We want
right.
people that are going to be active learners, that are going to take a part in the community, that are going to, and take advantage of all that we have to offer. So, that's where the qualifiable measures will come in, where you can show those pieces of yourself, and,
I love that.
That kind of 3
I'll tell you, Christine, why I love that so much, what you're saying, because, for those who may not score as high on the LSAT, right, I think it still gives a piece of a chance, if you will, right? So for a lot of our listeners, they get so caught up in the LSAT and the score, as if there's nothing else about you that matters, but you've got this life experience, you've got these things, bring those to the table, right? Yeah. And let those be a part of your process too. I love that about you. And so, I got to ask some questions that people want to know, because that type of stuff is huge though. And I think when we talk about it in here, and this is where I love what Steve has done, he's kind of segued into stuff like this. It's not just about that score, it's about the admission process as a whole. So let's talk a little bit about admissions, right? Because people want to know that too, and I hope that part gave them some warm fuzzies in their heart. But we know about the requirements, right? We got to have the LSAT score, some of those other things we just spoke about. But do law school admissions teams and committees really read every single law school application, and do they read them in their entirety?
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm going to say for myself, yes. And for the committee at BU Law, yes. So the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, every year, and regardless of how long you were working there, every year made sure, like, we would sit down at the beginning of the season and and kind of talk about the upcoming season, talk about how the season ended, and just be like, okay, we're getting new applicants. These applicants have invested time and money to submit their application. So they have essentially invested in us thoughtfully reading that application. And so that is our directive, is to thoughtfully read everything that is submitted. And that is like every email correspondence gets uploaded to an application. Like all of those pieces, we are reading everything. And taking all of that into account. So so speaking specifically of our that institution where I work, that I can say that. But I know that my colleagues in other institutions are doing the same and feeling the same.
It's interesting, and thank you for that, because I think that again, that means every piece matters, guys, right? That everything that you write. But you said something, and this is not on my paper, so I'm gonna segue just a bit, but not too far. You said even email correspondence. So that means like every interaction that you make with a school that you're interested in counts towards something. Yes.
Yes. And so when I was on the road, representing BU at different events and such, and doing question and answer, I like straight up always said that any correspondence that you send, treat it as if it is a professional document as part of your first legal contract, right? And so it's not like, like, hey, what's up? Like that kind of thing. I'm like, okay. Yet, but very cool. And so like that triggers a little something, and that just like, oh, okay, like this is a professional school, and it's for a profession where kind of that gravitas is a piece of it. And so you want to present your best self, and so like, I mean, we're casual. Like I love a good conversation just as much as anybody. I like, love energy just as much as anybody, but your email is going to be read by faculty. It's going to be read by the Dean of Admissions, potentially even like the Dean of the school might even come in and pull an application and read it. So, you want to present your best professional self.
Absolutely. And it's part of, we talk about it in the LSAT Unplugged, we talk about networking, right? And the importance of that email that you send out, right? The follow-up. things like
Yeah.
that. So I think those things are super important, and I'm glad we kind of hit on that, because I think of the application process we sometimes don't consider. But every time you meet up with a law school admissions team at the different symposiums and seminars,
Yeah.
all those things count, right? So
They
guys, keep that in
totally do.
mind. Every interaction is important. So that's awesome. So how many law school applications would you say that you read per week, and how much time is spent on each application?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So so it was quite a bit. I mean, excuse me. So we would set aside like actual reading days where you would just like hunker down, lock the door, like turn off the phone, and that would be your kind of reading day. So, each week we would try and average about, 100, 120. And that actually is kind of on the lower end because we wanted to devote as much time as we could to each individual application and kind of make sure it was getting a really thoughtful read and not feel like
Right.
we were rushing through. But that said, and I've said this to prospective applicants and clients, is that again, you want to make sure that all of your materials are on point, like everything that you're submitting is on point, that you're speaking clearly and concisely. One of the pieces of personal statement that to me, like, if you're the 50th application that I'm reading that day, like I'm going to do my best, but I'm also only human. And so if you're
Right.
my 50th application, I want you to be clear and concise and on point. And if I have to like spend a little extra on the brain, have to circle back and get like, okay, what was the point here? Like, why am I reading this? Like, where are we going with this? And how is it answering the question? That's going to be like, oh,
Right.
and
Right.
so reader go, oh, like,
Right.
that's where like I hit with prospective students that like just like clear, concise language, like hit your points, get in, get out type of thing, that type of
Right.
that type of stuff.
Absolutely. And that's beautiful. So I think what's good to take away from that, right, is like, hey guys, keep in mind as they're reading through the day, you could be the number one or you could be number 120, right?
Right.
And so
Yep.
we're only human. So as I get to number 120, I still want to captivate the reader, right? So it's got to be good. It's got to be good, but I like what you said, get in there, get out, right? Like, so,
Right.
but right, you could be 1 or 120. So we're going to take, we could be 120, 1 or 180,
Right.
if you will, right?
It doesn't mean that 120 needs to be like, I cured cancer yesterday and I'm working on COVID tomorrow. Like, that's not
Right.
what we're looking for in 120.
Right.
We're just looking for like, this is why I want to go to law school. These are my, characteristics, and this is why you should admit me. Boom, period, end of sentence. It
right.
hit me now, right?
I love it. I love it. Kind of talking about personal statements. The personal statements play a huge part, huge component in revealing who the student is, who the student really is to the team. So what does it take, Christine? What does it take to stand out, as a candidate? Yeah.
Right. So, just again, a little tidbit about me as a reader. I read personal statements first, right? So I would open an application and like get the first name, but then immediately jump into the personal statement because I want, my intent was to make this a person. And in the personal statement, that's to me is like the most color. That to me is answering the question, like, why am I reading this application? Why is this person applying to law school? And so,
and you need to go back and be on the admissions team.
I
think all of us are like, please go back and do that.
It was good. Well, see, now I can help you. Like now I feel like I can help people with it and do that. So yeah. So, again, like, that personal statement is an important narrative. And, and again, like, I don't want to put any more pressure on the personal statement because I know that writing about yourself, and then also like, some schools say like, 2 pages, double spaced, or like maximum 4 pages. And so we're trying to boil like 2+ decades of life experience, and like, how do I put that into 2 pages and,
Right.
and tell you everything without throwing the entire kitchen sink at you and making it like this big jungle mess.
Then I was 5, then I turned 6.
Exactly. And so, it's answering, like, the personal statement should, above all else, answer the question, why do I want to go to law school and
Right.
why now? Right. And
I love
so, in doing that, without having it be a recitation of your resume or, like going too in depth into things that are already answered in other parts of your application or will be answered in
Okay.
other parts, so
Right.
it's when I brainstorm with clients about personal statements, I literally interview them and just say, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then why do you want to go to law school? And they
Right.
tell me, like in a conversation, why they want to go to law school. And that usually ends up being the perfect personal statement. So think of it as, I'm answering an interview question of why I want to go to law school, and say it out loud as you're typing it up, like, and
Right.
just do the stream of conscious for that first draft, and then just
Right.
go back and edit. And, you ask the question, like, what makes the great, and the perfect personal statement. Again, I read a lot, and I read more good to great personal statements than I did
Right.
bad personal
Okay.
statements.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
yeah. So, one of the pieces of it is that, admissions committees are human, but they're also, like, with every application, they're
Right.
like energized and like, okay, this one's going to be great. Like, why do you want to go to law school? Tell me everything, type of thing.
Right. Right.
I would bet if we did a study of like admissions committees, like they're all like totally into reality TV and like to like glimpse into people's lives, like that, everything. But yeah, like we want to know your story. And so,
Right.
the only thing that comes to mind for me that's a really big thing about like what makes a poor choice in a personal statement is like, if the admissions committee is the first person to proofread your personal statement, that's a bad idea. Like, you should be proofreading the crap out of that thing and then going back in and proofreading it again. And, and just clarity and conciseness of language is like key, totally key.
Clarity and concise, guys. Write it down, take it with you. Clarity and concise.
Yeah.
This is a question that we kind of got, and I have to throw it out there. Has there been a personal statement that has like surprised you? You got it, and you were like, "Whoa, okay." Everybody read this one.
I know. Like it's interesting. Like I don't necessarily remember like the specific personal statement, but the personal statement as a piece of the entire narrative. Yes, like we've had those applicants where we are like, in committee discussions, we're like, oh yeah, that's this one that everybody, will have read and be like, oh, I remember that one too, like, et cetera. And so, and it's, it's usually just, again, like people who have, again, not cured cancer, right? Obviously, not cured COVID, right? Obviously, because these things are, still existing, but have done, cool things and have put together this clear narrative that has drawn people in and made people think like, yeah, like I want to be in the classroom with this guy. Like I want to hear this, woman's take on, intellectual property given, science background or whatever.
I love it.
Yeah. So there's been a lot. There's, again, more good to great than not so good to great.
That's good. I think that's warming too, to know like that what we're getting when I say, if you say 10,000, then half of them were, more than half were good, right?
Half. Yeah, so more than half.
So that should give some warm fuzzies, guys. Just write your story, right? Tell a little bit about who you are and why do you want to go to law school? It's not, we say rocket science in some cases, but it's a big take, right? Because people know that this means a lot. So they want that paper to slide across your desk and they're looking for that big wow, climb Mount Kilimanjaro. You're like, really? You're like 19, like, how did you do that? But You got more life experience than me. But I love that. But I love the other part that you said, Christine, about when you read it, you think about, I want to be in school with that person, right? I want that person's take. I think that's a beautiful way to think about it. So as you're crafting those statements, think about, what's going to make someone say, hey, I want to sit down next to Michonne and be in school with her, right? I remember I went, Christine, to a torts class, and because I'm like really trying to get in law school. So I went to this torts class, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they were talking about something dealing with fires and whose fault is it? And I'm like, I'm a homeowner, I'm a non-traditional student. I'm on, almost, I'm not gonna tell you, but I'm almost this age. And, and so I'm a little older. So I'm like, I'm a homeowner, I know what that feels like, but I was in the class with some younger people, and they were like, but doesn't insurance pay for that? And I'm like, no, no. So I thought about, and I started thinking about that and laughing to myself, but guys, think about those experiences and those opportunities and what you would bring to the school. I think that's great to know that that's what they're looking for. Yeah. Let's kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about diversity statements too, because I think those are just as important, right? So with a prompt, if you will, that instructs students to describe how they would bring this perspective, this very unique perspective to the study of law, or even contribute to serving diverse populations, right? How would you advise an applicant who is maybe unsure about including a diversity statement, whether or not they should or shouldn't?
Right. And so my advice is, if you have something more to say and you feel you can say it well and it will contribute to your narrative, right? Like, as you said perfectly, like your story, then I think it's an opportunity that you should give it a shot and see what you can come up with in that. Right. If you feel that your personal statement has hit the mark and that's your story, and it's in a story, and again, that clear, concise, and compelling story, then don't feel compelled to write additional pieces. Again, like when I was mentioned that, when I brainstorm with clients, usually in that brainstorming session, we'll talk, like I'll ask the question, why do you want to go to law school? And I'll get some really good information. And in that information, I will think like, okay, these are answering the question of why I want to go to law school. But then there's all these other little nuggets, like let's explore some of these other nuggets. And so then it can be, I wanted to go to law school, because of all of these reasons. And then it was reinforced when I, took this class or took this internship or did this project, or because of this other aspect of myself that isn't necessarily why I want to go to law school, but informs who I am and what I'm bringing to the table. And so that should be separated out from this original narrative, and then go to town on that secondary piece. Because again, if you have more to say, don't feel you need to jam it into the personal statement and muddy that statement. Feel free to use the diversity statement, follow prompts, again, like answer questions as they're asked. Some schools give more of an optional essay type of thing. Like, if you have more to say it here type of thing. And so, I say, if you have more to say it. And again, same kind of parameters as we talked about with the personal statement. Proofread it, don't rush through it. Give it the same amount of attention as you're giving all other aspects of the application. But it's hard, because when given that opportunity, if you're struggling to figure out what else you want to say, I say don't worry about it. That if it's a struggle and you're going to feel like you're just going to write air, that's not going to add
to. Don't force it.
Right, exactly.
Don't force it. And now, Christine, I noticed you didn't say much about like who should write a diversity statement, right? Because that's a question that comes up. Hey, I don't identify with the LGBTQ community, right? I'm not in a minority group, but that's not all. Diversity is huge, right? So I think some people get a little bit squeamish, if you will, about writing a diversity statement because they think I'm not diverse. But I imagine the law schools think the same way I do. Diversity is huge. It's a plethora of things. It's not just race, religion, right? Sexual orientation, etc.
Right, exactly. I mean, diversity of thought is one of the big pieces too. Like, everybody, and like what you were talking about too, like, coming from a diversity of perspective of like, I'm sitting in the classroom, we're talking insurance, none of these kids owned anything that, like where they had to read the fine print to realize that like, if I put in a claim here, they're going to be like, oh, that's not covered.
It's called an out-of-pocket expense.
Right, exactly. So diversity of experience in that, like I'm coming from this with like a little bit more work experience, a little bit more life experience, those types of things.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And so, guys, I hope that opens your mind up a little bit when you're thinking about, should I write a diversity statement? Like Ms. Christine told us, like, think about it. Is there more that I have to say? But also, diversity is huge, right? So don't just narrow yourself in there. Let's switch gears. I'd be remiss not to talk about the LSAT, right? We got to do it just a little bit. We brought it up a little bit before, but let's just dive right in. We know the LSAT score is huge, huge part. We talked a little bit though about those quantifiables versus those qualifiables, but what do schools really think about multiple LSAT scores? So, I'm on number 3, number 4 of this thing, and I'm just trying to get it a little higher. When you look at that application, is there any thought that goes into that?
My thought was just like, oh, this poor person, had to, put themselves through that 4 times, like, oh, but, we looked at everything, right? I mean, like, as we talked about before, like we read every piece of the application. So we're going to look at all 4 scores. We're going to read all 4 written submissions from all 4 tests. So yeah, I mean, what our policy at BU and largely for most schools is that we're going to assess you based on your best work, right? So we're going to see all of the other work, but we're going to assess based on the best day. And so, your best day is your best day. And if that was on your second try, your 4th try, it's going to be there. One of the pieces of, large numbers of tries is that, it's a kind of the law of diminishing returns, is that you're going to kind of hit a set point maybe. And so, that quest for the highest, ever, or making really large jumps after after that kind of initial one, after that initial test, like make an assessment of like how you felt on that day. Like, oh, I had a head cold, like there was noises, there was construction, like there were other things, or I sought more resources for the second one, like a change in your study habits and what you did and who you sought help from, et cetera. That's where kind of I've seen more marked change happen.
Right.
So yeah, but again, that's, more of my own personal kind of like feeling bad for people having to take it a ton of times. But, if you take it 4 times, you took it 4 times, and that's, we're still going to assess based on the highest score, right? Your best day.
And that's the thing, right? And I've been, it doesn't matter. This LSAT is whoa, right? And I'm in the military, and I've taken some tests. This one here, I tell people about it, and I'm like, we can do anything in the military, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna throw this LSAT at you. I guarantee you'll struggle. Guarantee you'll struggle, right? It's a different type of test, So a lot of people, when they jump in, they're like, what is this? And that coupled with the application process and admission and all this is a whole undertaking, right? So it's great to have people that say like, hey, guys, we recognize this part of you and this part of you, and all of these things make this application strong. So you have the LSAT score. Another part is GPAs, right? Where do those fall in line?
Yeah. So I mean, I was always asked the question, what's more important, the LSAT or the GPA? And prior to the GRE being available, the LSAT to me was kind of like the level playing field, and there was a lot of data on that. But I always thought that the GPA was more of your day-to-day, like in the classroom, more of how you performed as a student. And so, I always thought that the GPA was kind of, like that's the kicker, like a solid GPA shows that you show up, every class, every day, and do the work. And for me, that's what we're looking for in the classroom, is we're looking for the person to show up, do the work, be successful. So the GPA is important, and that's, I again, I'm hesitant to like put a ton of pressure on these quantifiables, but at the
Right.
same time, it opens doors. And so
Absolutely.
there's opportunity to be had with higher scores. And that's not to say that if you had a rough semester or you had, blips in your transcript, that's going to be the death, of an application. That's where a GPA addendum can come in, and you can say, again, clearly and concisely, not leveling the excuses, but just clearly and concisely, like my sophomore year, you'll all see a couple of courses where I didn't, perform to my best ability.
Right.
I outside, issues that have since been resolved, as you'll see in my other, grades, rebounded, blah, blah, blah. So there, you never want to have an admissions committee reader ask the question why and not have it answered in your words. And so that would be the instance, is like on a transcript, I would look through and be like, oh, I wonder what happened sophomore year, or like winter session, in 2019, like I wonder what that was about. And then look at an addendum and have the person say like, oh, I was working a full-time job during that semester and wasn't able to, or like I was president of this club and we were putting on this really big volunteer function, and and that took a lot of my time during winter session. Like, oh, okay, like I can see how that would have interfered here. And then say how you've addressed it. Say the changes that you made in order to then say like, okay, this totally isn't going to happen while I'm in law school because I figured out how to balance things a little bit.
Love that. I love that. So, and I think that's a huge takeaway, right? So guys, first off, when you're reading it, I think we have to be honest with ourselves. Hey, this part of my life wasn't really the best part, right? I got a D here, or, maybe I failed a class, or I dropped a class, or did something like that. Don't be afraid. And like you said, Christine, we're not using excuses, but just tell the truth. Right. This is what was going on in my life during that time, but this is what I did. Right. I love that. This is what I did. And you won't see that behavior from me, or you won't see these types of actions here. I think that's a good method to take a look and say, hey, I need to write this up. So that takes some honesty with ourselves, folks. Hey, this probably wasn't my best time of life, and that's okay. So, I think that's beautiful. So we talked LSATs, we talked GPAs. I do have to talk letter of recommendations really quick with you too, just because I got you here. And I'm gonna kind of ask this is kind of personal question. So I'm a non-traditional student, right? I've done the online school thing because, I've been in the military for the last 18 years. So every school has been online, So when we talk about letters of recommendation, I think we all kind of get a grasp of, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, who's the best people, but that one from those professors, I still struggle with going back to these online classes where I truly didn't connect with professors and getting that letter. So I'm asking personally, like, how much does that weigh? What's the steps in that predicament, in that situation?
Yeah. And so I want to tell you, again, speaking directly to you as this client, yeah, exactly. In this situation, is that admissions committees understand, right? Admissions committees understand that applicants with military background likely were taking some classes while deployed, so we're taking online or in different spaces. And the second piece of that is that if you can get military references, those references rock. Like those references were solid references, and they hit on all the marks of this person can handle the rigors of academics and law school and that time. So yeah, so to now for the general kind of overall, when schools are looking for letters and recommendations, often they will say an academic letter is preferred, right? It's rare that they say it is absolutely 100% required, because much like you're talking about in your circumstance, it's difficult to kind of track down someone that you literally have only emailed or chatted with, online. But then people who are applying who have been out of school for 10 years, it's difficult for them to go back and say hey, remember me from sophomore year when I was one of 150 people in your class?
Right.
13 years ago. So yeah, so professional recommendations are good.
Awesome.
All of that said, if you are currently in college, and have access to professors right now, schools are going to ask the question why you didn't get an academic letter of reference, right? You're just getting a recommendation from an internship advisor or another advisor. And so if you're currently in undergraduate in a brick and mortar which given COVID, there's going to be some flexibility, right?
Absolutely.
But generally in the brick and mortar type of educational setting, if you're an undergraduate applying directly to law school, a letter of reference from a professor or teaching assistant, someone that knows you in the classroom is advisable.
Okay, yeah, then that's good. That's great. See, that's one of them. Say we get two. Who does that other letter come from, Christine?
Yeah. So
who's that person?
Right. So so a funny story about that. We did have an applicant years ago now when our current president was the vice president. We had a letter of recommendation from the then vice president, on beautiful letterhead, et cetera. And that was cool, right? But, it didn't actually hold as much weight as someone who volunteered for an organization for 5 years and their supervisor in the organization wrote this 2-page testimonial to how awesome this person is. That, I didn't know who that person was, but that was a fantastic letter of recommendation. I thought the vice president recommendation was cool, and just kind of looking at it was wow, awesome. But that's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily need to be from this crazy seal and high office. Just someone that really knows you well and knows you either in a professional setting, an academic setting, can speak to your ability to communicate clearly, think critically, work collaboratively, all of those pieces. Yeah.
I love that. So guys, the takeaway there, Christine just gave you some jewels there. Don't go try to meet the president of education.
Exactly.
Right? Don't stop it now. Stop it now, right? Because those letters, and I think that's the thought, right? I'm not going to get in law school because I don't know this person or this person. Who knows you?
Right.
Who knows you? And who can speak to you? And that's who we're looking for, right? So I think that's a jewel to take away for sure. So last part I'm going to ask about, we're at the 442. Speaking to the students that are nervous to reach out to admissions offices. How would you advise students who need additional information or help? How would you say reach out? What would be their? I would just say do it. But for somebody who may be a little nervous or questioning, do I reach out to this school? Do I reach out to this admissions committee and say hello? What's the steps there?
Well, there's people like me on the other end of the phone or the other end of the email. We love talking to you. We're in this industry of education and higher education to serve you, right? We want to answer your questions. We want to be helpful. We want you to understand the process as best you can and have all the questions answered. And so yeah, I say, if you have a question, reach out. They are dying to hear from you. Absolutely 100%. And there's, every admissions office, they have people assistant directors, associate directors that are answering the phones and they can put you in touch with current students. They can put you in touch with alumni. They can be your conduit to getting all of these really great pieces of information. Absolutely. You're making a huge investment of time and money, huge investment. You should be kicking tires, doing test drives. You should be asking all sorts of questions. Definitely.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think, Christine, I tell people all the time, just say hello, send the email, right? Ask the question, sit in on a class if they're offering it. But what I have to say is do the work, right?
Yeah.
Do the work to meet someone, to say hello. Do take the time out to send that email and keep up with who you've contacted and reached out to. To me, this is a game of, yes, there's the LSAT, yes, there's GPAs, but this is a part of when you see Michon Montgomery cross your desk, you're like, I know Michon. I
Yeah.
know Michon. And that's a beautiful feeling. It doesn't have to be the president of the school, guys. This could be a student. This could be, and I want to just jump back really quickly because I didn't ask this one question, but how many people make up an admission committee, and like who are they usually made up of? And that'll kind of be my closer there for us, and then we'll do some final thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it varies from school to school. So again, my personal experience is, committees are made up of administrators, like admissions professionals. Sometimes they pull in certain instances. Like we had people that were applying for specific public interest scholarships. And so we'd pull in the director of public service and, and other kind of, eyes and ears from different departments. And then faculty were on our committee. And so, faculty were reading applications as well. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's great. So you guys, it could be a whole host of people, right? We never really know, right? So just get involved. If you know there's some schools you're interested in, some place you want to go, don't be afraid to just go out there, take a visit. And everyone's doing these virtual visits now. Jump on a virtual visit, ask some questions, right? Be a present face. And I think that's a beautiful way to just kind of start approaching this thing. So that's wonderful. I got to ask this last question, and here we go. We're going to close it out with this. If you had one thing to share with prospective applicants, what would that thing be?
Oh my goodness. One thing. One thing. Oh, like the first thing that comes to mind is proofread, right? Like make sure your full application, from front to back is you've read it through, it is telling your story, like Michon, like how you said that, like tell your story, and just make sure like it's proofread and just clear and just everything you want it to be as you're presenting yourself to to the committees. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. So I have to thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you.
I mean, this was phenomenal. I appreciate the conversation and the time. Is there a way of people wanting to reach out to you that they could?
Absolutely. So Christine.carr@accepted.com. That is my email address at Accepted. And I take all sorts of questions about all things law school admissions and all of that. So, and we do free consultations. So, you need not purchase anything upfront. You can, we can talk about like what questions you have. Sometimes they're just like quick one-offs that I'm happy to do, but feel free to reach out. Absolutely. And Michon, like this was such a pleasure. You have such a good energy. Like what a yay.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.